9. Suriname Rivière. The modern-day country of Suriname was once the only Dutch colony in South America. Known as Suriname or Dutch Guiana, its main fortification, Fort Nieuw Amsterdam, was located at the mouth of the Suriname River near the capital city of Paramaribo. It was here that the newly built Suriname Rivière lightship sailed in 1911, after being built in Haarlem in the Netherlands for the country's Ministry of the Colonies. The 81.5-foot, 25 meters vessel had no engines and was used to mark the mouth of the Suriname River. In addition to functioning as a floating lighthouse, the Suriname River served as a base of operations for coordinating naval traffic. It was replaced in 1968 and decommissioned in 1972, at which point it was relocated to the Fort Nieuw Amsterdam Open Air Museum, where it remains permanently berthed in a wet dock. The boat is in a serious state of disrepair and is in danger of being lost if urgent action isn't taken to save it. Ongoing efforts to save the Suriname Rivière have so far failed to come up with the necessary funding to proceed with the project. 8. The Scarista Bus. On the Isle of Harris in Scotland's Outer Hebrides Islands, there's a conspicuously out-of-place, dilapidated old bus. It's sitting on a grassy plain next to Scarista Beach. It was used for weekend outings by the Western Isles Scouts before it was destroyed in a brutal storm that battered the coast in 2005. After being given a new bus, the Scouts turned the old caravan into a camping space with a kitchen area, communal seating, and a small bathroom in place of where the driver once sat. But it eventually fell out of regular use and has since become an attraction for curious explorers who are free to go inside and look around. There's even a guest book for visitors to add their name to, along with any thoughts they might feel compelled to share. It's immediately clear upon entering the bus that it was once a comfortable, cozy getaway that was well taken care of. But it's now in a state of obvious neglect, with torn upholstery, dirty surfaces, and a visibly deteriorating exterior. The vehicle still contains items left behind by the Scouts, including bins full of blankets and a book filled with hymns and songs, giving it the eerie feel of a final camping trip gone wrong. 7. Waterrock Knob Plane Wreck. Nestled in the overgrowth alongside a hiking trail in North Carolina's Great Smoky Mountains, the graffiti-covered wreckage of a Cessna 414A serves as a tragic reminder of a deadly plane crash that happened back in 1983. A German immigrant and Chicago-based businessman named Ernest Martin was flying his secretary, Senta Jarrett, from Illinois to visit her children in Bryson City. He failed to file a flight plan as required and was seemingly unaware of the weather he would encounter as he neared his destination. Martin was right on course when he flew beneath low-lying clouds to maintain visibility, and in doing so, he flew too low and crashed into Waterrock Knob Peak, instantly killing himself and Jarrett. If he had flown just a few hundred feet higher, he would have likely reached the Jackson County Airport without incident. The wreck was officially blamed on pilot error. A post-mortem examination revealed that Martin had a blood alcohol level of 0.04 at the time of the crash, which may or may not have affected how he was flying, but exceeds the legal limit for piloting an aircraft. Investigators discovered the wreck near the mountain's summit about a week later, along with the frozen remains of the two victims. The bodies were returned to their families, and the engines and anything else of value were removed from the plane. And while visitors have taken pieces here and there over the years as morbid souvenirs, nearly the entire wreck remains at the site today, much like the dozens of other aircraft that were left in place after crashing in the Great Smoky Mountains. 6. Collins Beach UFO Boat. Located roughly 10 miles, 16.1 kilometers north of Portland, Oregon, Sauvie Island is the largest island along the Columbia River. It's home to a clothing-optional recreational area called Collins Beach, but it doesn't only attract visitors who enjoy sunbathing and swimming in the buff. Nestled among a thicket of trees near the shoreline, there's a moss and graffiti-covered UFO-like structure that draws curious visitors. Measuring roughly 30 feet, 9.1 meters in diameter and made from a combination of cement and wire steel mesh called ferroconcrete, the bizarre-looking contraption is an experimental boat that was built just a short distance upriver during the early 1970s. The family that built the vessel lived in it for a short period and used it for going on adventures before it ended up at its current location. Today, the boat's interior is empty, rusting, and filled with debris. It doesn't seem like a comfortable place to spend the night, let alone live in for any period of time. But when it was being used by its builders, it was equipped with basic comforts and conveniences, including generated power electricity and a minimalist but functional kitchen. Visitors are urged to use caution while exploring the derelict boat, which is slowly falling apart at the hands of time and nature. Would you like to see this UFO boat in person? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. 5. Land-to-sea cable car. There's a strange concrete structure sitting in the Atlantic Ocean, roughly 1,800 feet, 550 meters, off the Moroccan coastal city of Sidi Ifni. Built toward the end of Spain's colonial rule over the region in the 1960s, it was once part of a unique land-to-sea cable car system that was designed to make the shallow port easier to use for shipping. Ships approached the concrete station where people and cargo were offloaded into self-propelled carts that ran along large steel cables, which then transported them to an inland station. It was one of the only cable systems of its kind in the world at the time, and it was a source of local pride. Unfortunately, it was abandoned after Spain ceded the territory to Morocco, and it proceeded to fail into disrepair. The cables are no longer attached, but the concrete offloading station, the pylons that supported the cables, and some of the cars can still be seen at the site, along with some abandoned cargo that apparently never reached its destination. 4. La Merced. The 232-foot-long, 70.7 meters, four-masted wooden schooner La Merced was built in 1917 amid a rapid World War I shipbuilding effort to replace the merchant vessels that were being sunk at an alarming rate by German U-boats. After the war, the ship transported lumber between Portland, Oregon and California before being refitted as an oil carrier. The La Merced carried oil from the US to Australia and New Zealand and returned with shipments of grain. Then, during the late 1920s, the vessel operated as a floating cannery off Alaska. It was sold for salvage in 1965, at which point its four masts were cut off and the propellers, engines, and dock fittings were removed. From there, the La Merced was relocated to Lovrics Shipyard in Anna Cortez, Washington, where it was used as a breakwater. It remains there to this day as one of the few intact World War I-era ships of its kind. The derelict ship's hull is filled with sand, and it's become home to a small forest of trees. And while it sits on dry land next to the water, it reportedly remains watertight and in surprisingly good shape for its age. The La Merced was added to the National Historic Register in 1990 and has since become a popular destination among sightseers. 3. SS Point Reyes. A wooden boat that had an uneventful, if not boring, career before unexpectedly becoming an icon of the shoreline along Tamales Bay in California's Bay Area. Known as the Tamales Bay Shipwreck, the Inverness Shipwreck, or the SS Point Reyes, the vessel originally ferried troops between San Francisco and World War II warships. It then spent decades operating as a commercial salmon boat before being purchased by a local resident who planned to fix it up. But that never happened, and the SS Point Reyes has sat abandoned ever since it hit a sandbar during a storm. It's located in an otherwise protected wetland where it never would have ended up if it hadn't gotten there by accident. In fact, it was almost removed at one point for a wetlands restoration project. But the boat was left in place after locals, particularly photographers, campaigned against its removal. The SS Point Reyes has been in its current place for over 20 years and has become a hotspot among photographers eager to capture their own take on its crumbling beauty. It's the boat's popularity that nearly led to its destruction in 2016, when some photographers tried staging a backdrop of fireworks and accidentally lit it on fire. The local fire department spent hours combating the blaze and eventually managed to put it out, but the vessel was left even more damaged than it already had been from years of neglect and exposure to the elements. At this point, the wreck is considered dangerous to explore, but as long as it's still there, the charred SS Point Reyes will continue to draw eager visitors with camera in hand. 2. Time Electron. In 1968, British businessman and amateur sailor Donald Crowhurst attempted to sail around the world in a 41-foot, 12.5 meters, purpose-built boat called the Tynemouth Electron. He competed against others in the Golden Globe race and was apparently so intent on keeping up the image of being a top contender that he reported false positions. In reality, as his logbook would later reveal, his boat had started taking on water shortly after the race began. The equipment malfunctioned, and Crowhurst's lack of sailing experience only made matters worse. It seemed inevitable that the Tynemouth Electron would sink in rough seas, and after mortgaging his home and his failing business to secure his sponsors' continued financial support, Crowhurst faced certain financial doom if he somehow survived the ill-fated voyage. His initial plan was to hang around the Atlantic Ocean until the final leg of the race, then sail back to England and quietly come in last place. He remained mostly radio silent while occasionally reporting false positions, hoping nobody would notice that he hadn't actually completed the race, and stopped in South America to fix his boat in violation of the rules. But the prospect of his logbook being closely examined continued to loom over Crowhurst, whose mental state deteriorated while he hid out in the middle of the Atlantic. His writings detailed the tortured mind of a broken man who descended into a state of clinical paranoia and began suffering delusions. Crowhurst never returned from the race, and it's believed that he intentionally took his own life by jumping into the ocean and drowning. The Tynemouth Electron was found drifting in the Caribbean the following year, and the contents of the logbook found inside offered the first telling insight into the troubled sailor's possible fate. For several years, the repurposed boat was used as a cruise boat and a dive boat. It was left in the sand along the southern shore of Cayman Brac after sustaining damage in a hurricane, and has sat in place ever since, serving as an eerie reminder of the dark place Crowhurst found himself in after banking everything he had on a competition he was never likely to win. 1. NS Savannah. From the outside, there's nothing too unusual about the NS Savannah, but the interior is like stepping back in time to a living time capsule of the retro era and the early Cold War obsession with atomic energy. Built in New Jersey during the late 1950s as part of President Dwight Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace initiative, the NS Savannah was the first ever nuclear-powered merchant ship. The nearly 600-foot-long, 183 meters government-funded vessel was intended as a demonstration project for the potential of nuclear energy to be used for peaceful purposes. One of just 4 nuclear-powered cargo ships ever built, it operated between 1962 and 1972. In addition to carrying cargo, the Savannah was intended as a passenger vessel, complete with 30 staterooms, several lounges, a bar, a 75-seat dining room, a dance floor, a swimming pool, a promenade deck, and other features that were meant to make the voyage comfortable and enjoyable for all. The decor could perhaps be described as a mixture of vintage and sci-fi, with atomic and chemistry-themed sculptures, light fixtures, wall hangings, and even dining ware, geometric brightly colored furniture, and illuminated glass tabletops in the bar. At the time the ship was built, its interior design would have been considered ultra-modern. Sadly, passenger service only lasted for 3 years until it was discontinued in 1965, and only 848 civilians ever traveled on the Savannah, which could perhaps explain why its interior is in such seemingly pristine condition for its age. After being taken out of service and moving several times, the Savannah was moored at the Canton Marine Terminal in Baltimore, Maryland, where she remains to this day. The ship is reportedly opened to visitors for free tours every May around National Maritime Day, but is otherwise closed to the public. There's been talk about turning it into a museum ship, but these plans have yet to receive the necessary funding to be turned into a reality. Thanks for watching. Which one of these strange abandoned vehicles would you want to drive? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.